Okay guys, we're back again. Now that we've started to learn a lot of the tools in InDesign to create the content and manage things within the software, it's probably time that we start to actually structure a portfolio that you could work in throughout year 11 or 12. And like I mentioned in my first video, I'm going to be using a sample here or generating a sample for specifically a Stage 6 industrial technology portfolio in line with the current marking guidelines, which are published on the NESA website. You could look those up. You could use this same process to generate a very similar portfolio for design and technology, for example, but the headings that you use in line with the relevant marking guidelines for design and technology would be different. So we'll jump into the program and I'll do this with you. Now, you may, if you're from a different school and you're not within my class, you and your teacher may work with different headings, but I've used the guidelines here, and these are the 11 headings that I try to get my classes to use when developing their industrial technology portfolios. And a lot of these are broken down into smaller parts, but for the main headings, I get my class, and I want you guys, if you're in my class, to use these 11 headings. And if these are things that you don't already know what they are, I'll teach you those whether it's throughout these tutorials or whether it's in lessons later down the line. But this is what we're going to work with for creating this document. So I've got 11 sections. Now when we go back to InDesign, we create a new file. What we're going to do is, I'm just going to fly through this because I've taught you all of this explicitly in an earlier video. We're going to go A4, not facing. I like to work in millimeters. I've got 11 sections and I'm going to make 12 pages. We can add more pages later for the sections that are more than one page, and I'm also going to include a title page. You don't need a title page, you don't need a contents page, and if you were to get to the maximum number of pages in your portfolio, if you actually had an 81 page portfolio, the first thing I would tell you to do is delete your title page. It's not necessary, but assuming we do have spare page number, like we've got space, there's no reason not to include it. It's nice. So I'm going to include that. I'm going to set this to 3 columns, 5 mil and a 10 mil margin. The reason I'm not doing 12 or 15 is to save page space, given that we've got a page limit constraint, and create. So here's my 10-page portfolio, 12-page portfolio. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into my master page, and I'm going to quickly make myself a little header where I'm going to just write something like HSC electronics portfolio, followed by your student number. Just a reminder that you're not allowed to have your name on any of these documents. If you're in my year 11 class, that's fine, but if you're a year 12 student, you should only be putting your NESA student identification number there. The HSC markers don't care what your school number is, so just your NESA number. And I'm going to edit this quickly. I'm just going to chuck it to the right hand side and use that font that I like, if you haven't figured that out by now. And there's the font size probably doesn't apply to headers and footers, so you could really do whatever you wanted there. It doesn't really matter. And while I'm in the master page, I'm going to do a similar thing down here for the footer, but I'm going to make this centered. I'm going to delete that and insert the page number thing that I spoke to you about before, which is insert special character markers page number, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of formatting just to make it stand out a little bit more. And I'm going to chuck it to the bottom of that text box just so that there's a gap between the bottom of the columns and this thing. Now you could start to format this more if you wanted to, but that's already got me, a header and a footer. Now page 1, obviously going to be my title page. Again, I'm sort of flying through this because we don't need to learn any of this in specific detail, but it is what it is. I'm just going to give myself a bit of a background here, and I might make that a different color. Whatever, that'll do for now. And I'm just going to write a text box that says HSC electronics portfolio and a sample project. I don't know, let's go arcade game machine, just as a really quick heading here. And I'm not really focusing on this today, I just want to sort of start getting you to structure your own, so I'm not spending too much time on this stuff. Okay, so again, the title page doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to spend time there, but at the end, if you'd finished your project, you might put your a photograph there as well of your finished project. And like I showed you in one of the last videos, you might not want your header and your page number on the title page, so we can override there, right click here, override master page items, and then just delete those off the title page. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into adding those headings that I've used. Now, again, you could pause the video and screenshot this if you want to. These are the 11 headings that I get my classes to use based on the criteria. Your teacher may have pulled it apart in a different way and you should follow that, but this is what I'm going to use. So I'm pretty much just going to, I might actually pop that over there so I don't forget them. I'm going to use a similar thing here. I'm going to copy that and paste it onto page 2 so that I get the same color and the same size thing, just to get a bit of a theme going here. And text box here will go statement of intent. Now, if you're a design and technology student, you certainly wouldn't be using the terminology statement of intent. You'd be using design, well, you'd have your whole introduction section with the design brief, design situation, all that sort of thing. Consult your teacher for specifics. Now, there is a way in InDesign that you can actually, I believe there's styles, character styles, and you can start to save this font size and thing, and I could call this, heading. And now, when I scroll down, let's say I go to my next page, paste that blue background, and I make another text box here that says time management plan. You can basically just select this and choose heading, and it will apply the same font parameters, whatever you've done, which makes it a lot faster to start managing stuff here. But another way that I also do it so that you don't have to stuff around with character styles is to do one, copy and paste this. So I'm just doing Command C, Control C, or you could do whatever. Edit, copy if you want. Come to the next page. Now, you guys would be familiar with just pasting, but what's a good thing to learn in something like InDesign or Illustrator is you can go paste in place, which instead of just Control V is Control Alt Shift, or whatever it is on Mac, the equivalent where you hold down all three of those things and V, and that puts it in exactly the same spot. And then you can just edit the text, and it's going to use the same font parameters. Now, you may not choose to call that relevant research. I just put that there to remind my class that they don't need to include research into anything that's irrelevant. So the first thing that I would suggest you do here is just fly through all of this and insert all of the subheadings for all of those sections. And I know this is boring to watch, but I'm going to try and do it as fast as I can. A lot of ideas is done. This is design modification. We're going to do finance management. Record of production is usually the largest section of your folio, so we'll certainly have to add stuff there. Oops. Safe work procedures or practices. A lot of portfolios that get submitted end up including the WH&S or H&S information within the record of production in a big table, and that's totally fine. That's just a different way to address it. There's some other stuff that you could include here, especially if you're in electronics or woodwork and you're dealing with chemicals, and there are other safe work practices that you're aware of and that you've applied that you don't have evidence of throughout this, the steps and the stuff that you've done for your project. So I would suggest including it there as a separate section. Next one, presentation skills. A lot of you, I mean, you don't necessarily have to include that as a section. It's quite easy as a marker to assess a student's presentation skills without this being explicitly pointed out by looking at things like, okay, well, you've done drawing, you've used a word processing program, you've clearly used Adobe InDesign to develop your portfolio, you've submitted a video, you've managed photos in a good way, you've got tables, you've included, and just look at sort of those management skills and the way that you've presented your folio. But it's nice to have it explicitly pointed out, and it gives you some reassurance as a student. You know that the marker can't ignore it. The marker has to look at every page and has to mark everything that you've got there. So if you explicitly point out your presentation skills on a page in your folio, there's no downside to that. There's no reason to not include that. And the last thing here is final evaluation. So straight away, we've got a blank document here that pretty much just has your title page. It's got a header and a page number on every page, and you've got a heading for each section. Now, if, for example, it turns out that you needed an extra page for your statement of intent, you can just select your statement of intent page, click this little Create New Page button inside your Pages tab, and it will chuck in a blank page 3 and then update all of your page numbers accordingly. So it inserts a page in here and just updates all the page numbers, which is great. And then if your statement of intent happens to flow over here onto the next page, that's okay, and we can manage it without too much concern. So that's a good way to do that. You've got all the headings there now, and you could start to populate these pretty easily. I've got specific bits of work that I've probably done with you and specific ways that I've taught each of these things to you. I would suggest that you try and pick, a color theme, try and pick a shape or a size that you're going to make there's a minimum size to the pictures. If you check out the NESA website, there's a project advice document that has minimum size of pictures, and a picture smaller than that wouldn't be marked. So you need to make sure that your pictures are of whatever that size is. If you click here, you could type it in, and it may end up, being something like that, or it might end up being, I can't remember, I think it's 80 mils wide, something like that. So you'd have to have quite large pictures there, and it could be annoying if they don't line up with your columns, but that's okay. You need to just confirm that, and I would suggest having a consistent size for pictures. Or if you've got a picture with with something that's detailed that you need to make sure the marker doesn't miss it, or it's something that's you want to get a good close-up of, there's no reason to not make it bigger unless you're running out of page space, in which case obviously you could make that smaller if you need to. Now, before you start inserting pictures, before you start populating this, obviously a lot of you are going to have, throughout the year, you may have issues with file management, things go corrupt, you lose your files, whatever. The first thing I would suggest you do before you do anything else is, of course, save this somewhere sensible. File save as, you'll save it as an INDD document, and you should have somewhere accessible on your computer, or better yet, like me, saved in Google Drive, for example, where I know that everything's going to go here. So I could here, for example, put this into, I don't know, school classwork, 2021, HSC, major electronics, and I'll call this InDesign portfolio. There you go. And now that's saved, and I know where it is. And InDesign is a pretty safe platform. You shouldn't really have any issues with losing stuff, especially if you're saving stuff correctly. The next thing that I would do is I would tell you to go to that folder within your browser or within Finder, within Windows Explorer or within Finder, inside here. So this is your folio file. If you see something like this, a temporary file, that's just you can ignore that. It just locks it while you're accessing the file, and if I close InDesign, that will vanish. The next thing I'd suggest you do is make a folder here called Images. Every time you download an image or you take a photograph that you're going to use in your portfolio, you're going to put it in here, and that will make sure that you're managing your photos correctly, and all of them get printed out in a high resolution when you're ready, so you know that you can include stuff there. That's all pretty important. So you could spend some time setting up those character styles. You might have a different character style for your body text. Again, you should probably, what's not a bad idea here is just to insert some placeholder text. Get yourself what looks like a sentence. There you go. And I'm going to copy and paste that. Now what I'm going to do is like I was talking about before, you need to make sure that this is Times New Roman 12 or equivalent. So I'm going to set one of these to Times New Roman regular 12. So this one here is Times New Roman regular size 12. And this one here, I'm going to play with and decide on what font I like that's similar to that. Obviously the default here, which is Minion Pro, looks almost identical, but you could start to choose here. The one that I like, which I've been using a lot here, is Bookman Old Style, and you can see it's a bit bigger, so there's evidence that even if I knock this to size 11, it takes up more space than that, which would get you over the line, and that's okay to use. Turn off hyphenate. If you actually, by the way, unselect all your text boxes, so I don't have anything selected right now, I've chosen the black mouse and clicked off the screen. Now come to your character tab and untick hyphenate. That will now be the default for all text boxes, and you don't need to worry about it throughout the entire document. That should get you over the line there. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that you could do to make this faster for you to populate stuff later, because it's obviously great in Word that you can just click on a page and start typing, is you could fill all of these columns with blank text boxes, link them together by clicking on that little square and linking it to the next box, and now that page is ready to go. And even if you need to insert a picture later or something else there, if I chuck in that monkey picture that I got in a previous video, we know how to do this text wrap around the shape. And that text wraps straight around the monkey, so if I was to fill this with placeholder text, it wraps around the monkey there, you can see, and there's really no issues with that. It makes it really easy to do. Remember, in your text wrap box you can add a size, and so that makes it easy to quickly manage stuff. I've got an error now because that text went off the bottom, but you get the idea here. And you could just sort of, before I put the text into my statement of intent, before I put the monkey there, I've got these 3 empty text boxes. You could copy that and then go and paste in place it on every page. So I'm just scrolling to every page, clicking on the page, and then going paste in place by using the keyboard shortcuts. Anyway, that's probably enough in terms of just getting your document set up. Make sure you save again now that you've put all your text boxes and set your character styles. And next lesson or next video, I'm going to look at creating a time management plan in Excel and then getting it in here in a high quality version that won't lose any detail, so that it comes up clearly within InDesign. Thanks, and I'll see you in that one.